I remember the day, November 30, 2015. I got a sudden headache, like a total brain pain. That night, I could not sleep. The next day, I was worse. My neck was really sore, my back was really sore, my abdomen started hurting. I became uncharacteristically snappy and very agitated. The headache continued, the insomnia continued. Where I used to get an occasional headache or I had a night I had trouble falling asleep, this was different. This was much more intense. It was all day, every day, all night, every night, and it came on so suddenly. I was wired, yet insanely fatigued. I work in a home office and could hardly function at my job. I would dictate a report, but be unable to read what I just dictated. I felt I was losing my ability to read altogether. I just could not focus. I'd be in the midst of a conversation, and my brain suddenly would go blank. I couldn't remember what I just said, what I wanted to say, or even where I was. One Saturday, I'm driving my daughter to dance, and the traffic light ahead of me changed. I panicked. I couldn't remember if green meant go or stop. I looked around, and there were no other cars, and I went through that green light, praying. Green really did mean go. My health was failing, my memory was failing, my cognition was failing. I became depressed, and I developed a cardiac arrhythmia. Interestingly, I found while outside, some symptoms would subside and I could relax. I found I could even sleep outside in the winter and the cold, inside a little sailboat we had parked in the backyard. Prior to all this, I was in decent health. I would wear out sometimes, but I loved staying fit, exercising, eating well, and enjoyed the sequela of feeling good. I would get this pain in my ear each time I placed a cell phone to my head, or in this nasty electrical sting up my hand to my elbow if I just held a cell phone or touched a tablet or a laptop. So I learned to minimize my contact with them. If I never touched these devices, I never got that pain. But that sudden health decline was November 30th, and it continued like a vertical drop. So what happened? The only thing of significance that day was the utility company was out to upgrade my electric meter to the new model. The new model was a smart meter. The old-fashioned meters are electromechanical analogs, and as electricity is used, you can see the numbers or dial rotating around the face of the meter. A meter reader would come out once a month and record the kilowatt hours used, so the utility would know how much to bill you. The new smart meters are digital and transmit information about electrical usage remotely, much like a cell phone or cell tower does. The new smart meters also transmit information about the smart appliances in your house, like a smart refrigerator or a smart TV. But could there be any connection between the installation of that meter and the onset of my symptoms the exact same day? Did anybody else get so sick after a smart meter was installed? It didn't take long to discover that answer. Yes, they did. I became a veterinary radiologist in 2002. In the process, I learned quite a bit about radiation. I really learned to respect it, especially X-rays. But there's other forms of radiation. Smart meters and other radio transmitters emit several types of non-ionizing radiation. Non-ionizing radiation is a series of energy waves composed of oscillating electric and magnetic fields traveling at the speed of light. One type of non-ionizing radiation is radio frequency. Radio frequency is what wireless devices use, like computers, tablets, laptops, smart appliances, routers for Wi-Fi, cellular antennas used outside. You may be thinking, well, I'm around this technology all the time and it has no effect on me. You may be right. All bodies will respond differently, and some will be more sensitive. But think about some of the health problems you may have, and consider if technology could be contributing. You may never have thought about this before, because you may not have known the effects it causes. The prevailing mechanism of injury appears to be that non-ionizing radiation from these man-made sources induces oxidative stress within the body. In other words, chronic inflammation. Oxidative stress has been linked to numerous illnesses, particularly chronic diseases. Arthritis, high blood pressure, diabetes, dementia, behavioral problems, cancers, the list is long of illnesses resulting from these pesky little free radicals. Non-ionizing radiation essentially pokes little holes in cells, causing them to leak and affecting their function. This appears to happen through voltage-gated calcium channels in the cell membranes. Our bodies function electrically through these channels. An EKG of the heart, EEG of the brain, EMG of the muscles are common tools used to measure the electrical activity of these organs, but the entire body functions through electric charges. It's easy to see how the body will fail if it can't compensate enough when its electrical activity is disrupted. The biological harm of non-ionizing radiation has been known and documented for 50 years. We hired a consultant to assess the house. The consultant said he's seen this before with conducted emissions on the wiring and suggested turning the circuit breakers off at night to de-energize the bedrooms. This was an instantaneous fix to the insomnia. Literally like a switch, I could sleep in the house again. It turns out that conducted emissions, which are spikes of electrical noise, broadcast from the wires behind the walls into the living spaces like a great big antenna, can be particularly intense coming from a digital utility meter and very biologically irritating. But turning those circuit breakers off at night did not resolve my other symptoms, just the insomnia. About 6 months later, some technicians from the power company were out on my property to investigate some other problem. In the process of sorting out that problem, they pulled the smart meter off my house. My cardiac arrhythmia was already better by the end of the week. By the end of 2 weeks, it was worlds better, and by about a month, it had resolved. My mood was returning. My happy was returning. That bad headache finally stopped. My energy was returning. My memory had and still has a way to go. But otherwise, that summer, I was finally feeling so much better. Then a few months later, my health declines in the exact same way again. After a few weeks of that, I ran around to the back of the house, and sure enough, the smart meter had been reinstalled. It was pulled a second time, and my symptoms resolved a second time. These symptoms began as soon as that meter was placed on the house on 2 separate occasions, and those symptoms resolved when the meter was pulled from the house on 2 separate occasions. Before all this happened, years earlier, I remember reading an article that someone could feel a cell phone from 12 feet away. Well, that's cuckoo, right? Who can feel a cell phone? Well, it's not so cuckoo when it's you. It's painful, and it's embarrassing. Most people can't understand unless they already personally relate. It sounds too crazy. But my healthful rigor is no longer. And why would I publicize this? There's a few reasons. One is that 3 of my friends have credited me for saving their lives. 3 have told me I saved their life. 1 had already planned her suicide. The physiological imbalances following smart meter exposure in her neighborhood induced such physical and emotional pathologies that the idea of suicide was the only solution. Most of what I did for these friends was share my story and my experience, the same thing I'm doing here, and enable their escape from the noxious environment. The changes made a big difference. All their symptoms also dramatically improved as well. 2 of these friends had initially absolutely no idea that wireless signals and other electronic devices had anything to do with their serious health decline. Did you know about this? Did you know your health can be compromised from technology? What if you were to find out you were being adversely affected by some type of man-made non-ionizing radiation? What can you possibly do in this technological world? Wireless signals and electronic devices are everywhere. The answer is to change the environment that causes the biological damage. In my case, the smart meter exposure heightened my intolerance to electromagnetic fields. After removing that meter, we had to keep cleaning the electrical environment around me. This process was greatly aided by measuring the radiation with equipment for this purpose. A good start is to use relatively affordable consumer-grade equipment and measure the electric fields, the magnetic fields, the conducted emissions, and the radio frequencies. A more advanced approach is to hire an experienced consultant. To solve the problem at home, we eliminated or drastically reduced all cellular exposures and other wireless signals. For internet connectivity, we hardwired all computers and devices with Ethernet cables. My cell phone and my family's cell phone are always in airplane mode at the house. Any calls to my number are forwarded to my landline. If those phones or devices are not in airplane mode, the pulsed microwave radiation coming from them is constant and significant. I use text apps on the computer instead of through cell phones. We changed out some of the entertainment equipment because disabling the wireless signals was just not possible in some of them. Same thing in the vehicles. We could disable the sources of wireless signals, but this is not possible in many of the newer cars. We removed other sources of conducted emissions coming from LED lights, fluorescent lights, dimmer switches. We added an electrical filter to the panel box to remove other sources of conducted emissions from different electronics and motors. I keep a healthy distance from anything measured to have strong electric or magnetic fields. I use keyboards, mice, and earphones that communicate through wires, not microwaves. We've had to address numerous wiring errors in the house from very poor quality and sloppy electrical work. We eventually replaced the unshielded Romex wiring behind the walls with shielded wiring. All these changes made a significant improvement to the household exposures and subsequently my well-being. I was far less irritable, moody, exhausted, and achy, much better able to focus, read, and relax. But we had relative easy control over the exposures in our house. A bigger problem can be that many of the sources of significant radiation are much harder to control. For instance, in Pennsylvania, it is currently mandated that all homes and businesses must have smart meters. Tiny electric utilities are exempt, but otherwise, if you do not accept a smart meter, the utility will cut your power off. Those are the 2 choices right now, unless you enter the legal battlefield. Imagine that. Try taking your electric company to court. We did because we had to for survival. We were very fortunate to have this other electrical problem the utility addressed, and in the process, They pulled the smart meter from my house and replaced it with what's called a bridge or plate, which keeps electricity flowing but does not meter electrical usage. As soon as that plate was on the house and I recovered, we had to file all the legal proceedings to keep them from making any additional changes. Our case is still pending, and our electric bill has been estimated since 2016. Thousands of people have been complaining of these new meters, and hundreds have taken it to the courts in Pennsylvania alone. And these cases started over 10 years ago, and smart meters are still mandated in Pennsylvania. We are awaiting a ruling from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that is expected to determine if there ever was a legal mandate to install these meters in the first place. And in the Pennsylvania legislature, several bills have been hung that, if ever passed, could have given Pennsylvanians a choice of utility meters. Wi-Fi, cell phones, Bluetooth, smart appliances, smart devices, cellular antennas, they're everywhere. In this plight, I have witnessed a vast amount of suffering. Many thousands of people already know that some type of man-made non-ionizing radiation causes or contributes to their often debilitating health condition. I am their voice. Many others have not yet made this connection. I encourage you to look into your health and consider if technology could be contributing to any problems. The clinical and scientific evidence of harm is overwhelming, and I can attest to that. A clean electrical environment is really making a difference. Pulsed microwave radiation and other sources of non-ionizing radiation are real. The stress accumulates over time, though some of us can and do become ill much more immediately. Thank you.